In the vast expanse where time weaves its secrets and the horizon dances with shimmering mirages, there lies a desert unlike any other, a place where reality bends and the whispers of eternity stir the winds. It is here, in this enchanted wilderness, that a woman of faith and fire steps forth, Sarah, the matriarch chosen by destiny. Her journey is not merely across shifting sands, but through the veils of vision and spirit. Guided by celestial messengers, challenged by trials that test the very essence of her soul, she walks the path laid by divine promise. Each step carries the weight of a covenant older than the stars, a sacred seed planted in the heart of a future yet unseen. This is the tale of a quest beyond the mortal realm, where angels speak, time unravels, and a mother's courage becomes the shield of a timeless legacy. In the desert of destiny, Sarah's spirit will be forged by fire and faith. Her story, a beacon across the ages. Prepare to journey beyond the known, into a saga of hope, trials, and an unbreakable promise. This is Sarah's story, a legend etched in the sands of eternity. Chapter 1. The Promise Awakened. The sun hung low over the horizon, casting a golden blaze that stretched like a ribbon across the endless sands. In the heart of the vast desert, where the wind whispered ancient secrets and the dunes moved like sleeping giants, Sarah stood quietly beneath a canopy of stars. Her eyes reflected the flicker of distant fires, not from any earthly flame, but from the fire of a promise that shimmered on the edge of time. Her robes fluttered in the night breeze, catching grains of sand that danced like fireflies around her. She had followed Abraham for decades, across kingdoms, over mountains, through famine and silence. The man of vision, of dreams, of divine calling. But tonight, something stirred, not in her husband, but in her. A breath of the eternal, whispering not to his ear, but to her soul. She turned her gaze skyward, where constellations glimmered like scripture written across the firmament. In that silent watching, the veil between the worlds thinned. A soundless chime rang across her spirit. Time seemed to still. Then, the vision. A figure emerged from the light, not walking, but unfolding into reality, as if made of pure starlight and memory. Wings stretched behind him, vast as eternity, their feathers like woven glass. His voice, though soft, carried the thunder of the deep. "Sarah, daughter of dust and fire," he spoke, "your name shall echo beyond the wilderness. The breath of nations rests in your womb. What you guard shall become the covenant of kings." She fell to her knees, heart pounding like a war drum. The angel's presence burned and comforted all at once, both a consuming fire and a gentle wind. He reached out a hand, not to touch her, but to show her. Visions bloomed around them. A boy with eyes like hers playing near wells of water, cities rising in foreign lands, prayers in unknown tongues, all tied to her, to a child not yet born. But beware, the angel continued, for the shadow watches. The serpent winds through the sands, seeking the seed. You must walk the path not just of faith, but of fire. The test shall come not from the world around you, but from within. With that, he vanished. The vision dissolved like mist in morning light, leaving only the silence of stars and the sound of Sarah's breath. She remained still, overcome, not with fear but with awe. Her journey, long believed to be that of a companion, had now become one of divine consequence. She rose slowly, fingers brushing the sand. The desert pulsed beneath her feet, as if it too had heard the voice from above. The air felt charged, every grain of sand humming with unseen energy. The moon cast a silver path before her, like an invitation. She walked. Each step was heavy with wonder. She passed sleeping tents where Abraham and his servants lay unaware of the revelation that had pierced the night. But the fire within her would not let her rest. She wandered into the wide stillness, until the camp disappeared behind her and the desert wrapped her in its ancient arms. As she climbed a low hill, the wind shifted. The stars above shimmered strangely, and the landscape seemed to fold and shift, time itself bending around her. A mirage formed ahead, a great tree, blooming in the desert, its roots made of light, its leaves inscribed with glowing symbols. She approached it, but just as her fingers reached for the bark, it vanished. Another test of vision, another symbol. Behind her, a whisper stirred the dunes. Not wind, something more alive. Sarah turned. A shadowy figure stood at the edge of sight, draped in black, eyes like coals buried deep in ash. No words passed between them, but she knew the enemy had seen her awakening. She hurried back toward the camp, heart racing, not from fear, but from urgency. The journey had begun, and with it, the battles of the unseen. She had become more than a witness. She was now a bearer of prophecy, of bloodline, of covenant. As the first light of dawn crept over the dunes, Sarah arrived at the tents. Abraham stirred, sensing the shift in her spirit. But she said nothing, not yet. The time for speech would come. For now, the fire had been lit, and it would carry her through every trial ahead. She turned once more to the horizon, where the sun kissed the sand. In the distance, the desert shimmered like a living tapestry, waiting to be walked. And so, beneath the awakening sky, Sarah stepped forward into the desert of destiny, where angels would speak, shadows would challenge, and the threads of time would twist and turn. Her story had begun, not as a follower, but as a chosen one, a tale of faith, courage, and the eternal promise that would shape generations to come. Chapter 2. The Desert's Veil. The sun climbed higher, a merciless eye in the heavens, casting down heat that danced like fire upon the shifting sands. Sarah moved through the vast expanse with steady steps, her footprints like whispers vanishing behind her. Around her, the desert stretched into forever, a canvas of gold, alive with heat, silence, and secrets yet untold. Each dune rose before her like a question, and each descent felt like falling into the unknown. The winds, scented with salt and sun-baked earth, wrapped around her robes like ghostly fingers. Yet she did not falter. The promise still burned in her soul, a seed of eternity planted by divine hands. And with each heartbeat, that seed pulsed stronger. But the desert was no silent witness. It breathed, it watched, it waited. The sky shimmered with an unnatural light, and the edges of the world began to blur. Strange whispers echoed faintly through the air, voices that spoke no words, yet stirred something ancient in Sarah's bones. Time itself faltered. A moment could stretch into a lifetime or pass in the blink of an eye. This was no longer just a journey across land, but across the very fabric of reality. The deeper she walked, the more the desert seemed to shift around her. Trees flickered in and out of existence. Oases vanished like dreams, and even the wind began to carry visions, fleeting glimpses of other lives, other choices. Was it the heat? Or something more? A test, perhaps. Then came the silence. Not the hush of peace, but the deep silence of reckoning, thick and heavy, as though creation itself held its breath. And from that silence, the sand stirred. A figure rose from the earth like mist forming flesh. Tall and robed in radiant fabrics that shimmered like starlight, its eyes were twin suns, glowing with a fire that was not of this world. It bore no weapon, yet its presence parted the very air. Sarah, the being intoned, its voice a blend of thunder and lullaby. You tread the veil, the place where truth and illusion entwine. What you seek lies beyond, but so do the shadows that would see the covenant undone. Sarah met the being's gaze, her breath steady though her heart thundered. What must I face? The shadows, the figure replied, are not always foes without, but within. Doubt, despair, the fear of being forsaken. These will rise against you like the storming sands. They will whisper lies when your heart grows weary and cry louder than faith in your darkest hour. A wind stirred, and the figure's robes fluttered like wings. Yet it continued, you are not without aid. The watchers of the flame, the servants of the everlasting, walk unseen. But their hell must be earned, not claimed. And your soul must shine like the morning star before they will answer. The figures slowly began to dissolve, grains of golden sand lifting into the wind until nothing remained. Alone once more, Sarah stood in the aftermath of revelation. The words lingered like a mantle over her shoulders. The desert had not only tested her body, it had reached for her spirit, and still she endured. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the steady thrum of her heartbeat. She was more than flesh now. She was faith incarnate. She was the bearer of promise, the matriarch of a future yet unborn. Around her the desert shifted. Shadows moved in the corners of her vision. Not enemies, but memories, fears, and the fragments of who she had once been. One by one, she would face them. With fire in her veins and the covenant in her heart, Sarah walked deeper into the veil, where destiny waited, cloaked in sand and silence. Her footsteps did not waver, and the desert at last began to listen. Chapter 3: Whispers of the Eternal Flame. The desert sun dipped low on the horizon, bathing the sands in hues of copper and crimson. Dunes cast long shadows that twisted and danced like spirits unbound, painting the landscape with a surreal beauty. In the dying light, the world held its breath, caught between the memory of day and the mystery of night. Sarah moved with quiet reverence through the waning heat, her eyes scanning the horizon where sky met earth in endless embrace. The silence around her was no longer empty. It thrummed with purpose, as though the very desert had begun to speak in its own ancient tongue. She came upon a lone acacia tree, its gnarled branches reaching heavenward like a silent prayer. Beneath its sparse shade, Sarah knelt, not in exhaustion, but in awe. Here, the air felt different, thicker, sacred, as though layered with the breath of countless generations. Time itself unraveled, coiling like smoke. Past and future merged, and only the present remained. Then it stirred, the warmth. Subtle at first, like the faintest spark within her chest. A flicker, a heartbeat, a pulse older than stone and sky. The eternal flame. She gasped softly as it swelled within her, not as fire that burns flesh, but as light that illuminates the soul. It was the divine promise made manifest, the covenant passed through ages now resting in the vessel of her spirit. She was not merely carrying destiny. She had become a living ember of it. The wind shifted, carrying a soft murmur. It was not just air, it was voice. Voices. Whispers. They drifted all around her, a chorus from beyond the veil. Some ancient, others childlike, all layered together in a melody that echoed through the chambers of her soul. Though she could not see them, she felt them, the unseen witnesses of her path. "Fear not, Sarah," they whispered, tender and powerful. "For within you burns the light that darkness cannot consume. What lies ahead are but shadows, cast by the brilliance of your faith." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sorrow, but of sacred recognition. She closed them and allowed the voices to pour through her like water over dry ground. In their presence, visions unfolded. She saw angelic warriors, clad in armor that shimmered like the dawn, standing guard over a hidden altar. She beheld stars dancing into patterns, constellations that formed sacred symbols from a language only the soul could understand. She glimpsed a child, laughing, radiant, running through fields of eternal spring, a promise of life yet to bloom. And then, the shadow. It slithered through the edge of her vision, coiling, whispering different words, soft, poisonous, full of doubt. "You are alone. You are unworthy. You will fail." But Sarah's heart, already kindled by the eternal flame, did not waver. She had heard those lies before in darker moments. They were nothing more than illusions, echoes of fear. And now, her spirit stood like stone, unshaken. "I carry the promise," she whispered aloud, "and I will not falter." She rose, her form outlined in the twilight like a pillar of fire and resolve. Above her, the first stars blinked into view, not as distant lights, but as guides, ancient eyes watching over the sacred journey. The night fell with majesty, cloaking the desert in velvet blue and silver. But Sarah felt no fear. The flame within her burned brighter than ever, casting its own light upon the path ahead. With steady breath and sacred purpose, she stepped once more into the unknown, her every footfall a vow, her every heartbeat a hymn. For she no longer merely sought the eternal flame. She was becoming it. Chapter 4. The Trial of Shadows. The night in the desert had deepened into a vast and sacred silence. Overhead, the firmament unfurled in solemn majesty, a celestial scroll inked with 1,000 stars, their light steady, ancient, and watchful. Beneath their gaze, Sarah walked alone, her form small against the immensity of the wilderness. The breath of the earth had grown cold, and each gust of wind carried with it the memory of forgotten battles and the scent of unseen peril. The fire of the sun had fled, yet the heat of the trial remained, not on her skin, but within her soul. She moved as a pilgrim between worlds, her feet stirring the dust of prophets, her heart thundering beneath the weight of the covenant she bore. The path twisted now, no longer the gentle sweep of dunes, but a maze of stone and shadow, of silhouettes that shifted as if watching her. Trees appeared like withered hands. Rocks jutted out like broken altars. The very desert seemed to breathe, and that breath was heavy with trial. Then came the voice. It did not rise like thunder, nor fall like rain. It was still and vast, like the void before creation. And from the shadows it came. A figure cloaked in darkness, tall and unmoving, its eyes alight with a chill that pierced deeper than any blade. Sarah, it intoned, its voice neither male nor female, but something older than either. Bearer of the covenant, to protect the seed of promise, you must pass through the night of the soul. The trial of shadows is upon you. The word struck like a bell in the hollow of her heart. She faltered, just for a moment, as waves of dread rolled over her. Not fear of beasts or death, but something more intimate. Herself, her past, her pain, her silent questions, her unanswered prayers. In a breathless instant, the world shifted. The stars blinked out above her. The wind ceased. The sand turned to black glass, and all around her swirled the ghosts of unspoken sorrow. She beheld her failures, moments when she had doubted the journey, questioned the voice that called her forth. She saw faces lost to time, dreams withered by waiting, the ache of silence where answers never came. The figure raised its hand, and the shadows thickened, pressing upon her chest, whispering in cruel unison, "You are unworthy. You are alone. The flame will fade." Her knees buckled beneath the weight of it. But then, deep within, a glow. Not a blaze, not yet. A flicker, a breath of light, untouched by shadow. It was the eternal flame, not as fire consuming, but as presence enduring. She clung to it, a child to a promise. And as her hands curled into the sand, she whispered, "I will not yield." The whisper became a breath. The breath became a word. "I will not yield." And the word became a cry, strong and terrible. "The promise is greater than my fear." Light erupted from within her, not like the sun, but purer, like the first dawn ever spoken. The shadow recoiled, its form unraveling, its voice cracking into dust. One by one, the stars returned above her. First a few, then a dozen, then a multitude. The night was no longer silent. It sang. The wind returned, gentle now, carrying the scent of hope. Sarah rose, her body trembling, not with weakness but with glory. She was changed, not hardened but refined. She had not escaped the shadow. She had passed through it, and in doing so had drawn closer to the heart of the covenant. The darkness had tested her, but the flame had prevailed. Ahead, the horizon began to blush with the promise of dawn. The first light crept across the dunes like a benediction, revealing the path forward. Sarah walked once more, her steps firm, her eyes bright. For though night had tried to claim her, she now walked as one who knew the truth. that the soul who carries the promise shall never walk in darkness alone. Chapter 5. Guardians of the Covenant. Dawn broke like a revelation. The veil of night lifted slowly from the shoulders of the world, revealing a desert drenched in gold. Not mere light, but sacred fire spilled from the gates of heaven. The sands, once cold and silent, now shimmered with a warmth that felt older than time itself. Every grain sparkled like a whisper of divine memory. Sarah walked, her cloak tugged gently by the morning wind. Behind her lay the shadows of the trial, still present, still echoing, but no longer holding sway. Before her stretched the path of promise, and with it, the weight of glory. Then, on the crest of a distant dune, movement. Figures, luminous and tall, emerged from the golden haze. They came not with sound, but with presence, beings of impossible grace, cloaked in robes of woven light. Their very forms seemed carved from dawn itself. As they descended the slope, the desert bent in reverence, and even the wind stilled. These were no mortals. They were the guardians of the covenant, watchers of the sacred vow, appointed in the age when the stars were young. Their faces bore the wisdom of the firmament, and their steps left no mark upon the earth, as if they walked in both time and eternity. One step forward. He was crowned in flame that did not consume, and his eyes, like polished silver, saw both future and past. Wings of fire unfurled from his back, casting dancing patterns upon the sand. He gazed upon Sarah, not with judgment, but with fierce and holy recognition. Sarah, daughter of the promise, he spoke, and his voice was like thunder made gentle. You carry within you the seed of the covenant, a fire hidden in flesh, a word wrapped in mortal breath. But to fulfill what has been ordained, you must become more than a bearer. You must become a vessel of divine power. Sarah bowed her head, the desert wind rustling her garments like the pages of a sacred scroll. Her voice was steady, though her heart trembled with awe. Tell me, Lord of Light, what must I do? The guardian extended his hand, and the sands around them rippled, revealing visions in the dust. Nations rising and falling, the cries of children unborn, the weight of a future still unwritten. The path is narrow and stained with sacrifice, he said. The covenant's seed is fragile, but if tended with faith, it shall become a tree whose branches shelter generations. We will walk with you, but the fire must rise from within. Then the others approached, 6 in number, their faces veiled by glory. Each guardian bore a different gift. One carried a vessel of oil, another a scroll, a third a blade that shimmered with light not of this world. They encircled Sarah, forming a living circle of protection. At their touch, her spirit kindled anew. Strength surged through her limbs, not her own, yet dwelling now within. She saw herself not as a wanderer, but as a matriarch of something eternal. The dust on her feet became holy. The journey ahead, sacred. Remember, said the first guardian, his eyes aflame, you are not merely a traveler. You're the first stone laid in a temple not made by hands. Your choices shall echo through the halls of eternity. A hush fell. Then, with the rising of the sun, the guardians turned. Their wings spread wide, lifting them into the sky like pillars of fire. One by one, they vanished into the heavens, their radiance becoming part of the day itself. Sarah stood alone, and yet not alone. Around her, the desert pulsed with unseen presence. The covenant was alive. It beat with her heartbeat. It breathed with her breath. She drew her cloak tighter, the wind now warm and filled with purpose. Her eyes lifted toward the horizon, where the sands met the sky in a shimmering veil. Beyond it, destiny waited, and with a heart ablaze, she stepped forward, not as a woman lost in the wilderness, but as the chosen bearer of an ancient promise. The guardians had spoken. The covenant had awakened. The journey had only just begun. Chapter 6. The Sands of Time. The desert was endless. A vast ocean of flame-kissed dunes, stretching beyond the grasp of sight, its horizon blurred by heat and mystery. Sarah walked alone, her form a solitary figure carved against the sunlit expanse. The wind spoke in ancient tongues, carrying secrets of stars long fallen and futures yet unborn. But here, in this sacred place, time had no master. Moments did not pass as in the world of men. Instead, they drifted, floating like golden motes suspended in a breathless sky. The desert twisted reality, unweaving the thread of chronology until past, present, and future became one. Here, time was not a straight road, but a spiral, and Sarah stood at its heart. Her footsteps slowed. All around her, the air began to shimmer, as if the sun had split the veil between worlds. Visions unfurled like banners in the wind. She saw children playing in tents by the river of Eden, warriors carving paths through wilderness, temples rising, crumbling, and rising again. She saw her own face, older, younger, timeless, watching, waiting, weeping. The sands beneath her feet whispered. Each grain seemed to hold a memory, a heartbeat, a prayer. Then, from the core of the silence, a voice emerged, not loud, but eternal. It was as if the desert itself had chosen to speak. Sarah, keeper of the covenant, daughter of the living flame, it murmured with the cadence of creation itself, you have stepped into the river of days. Here, time does not bind, it flows. To walk the path of the promise, you must learn to read the current, to bend with its rhythm. Before her appeared a vision, a great hourglass, suspended in the air, its frame wrought from celestial stone, its sands glowing like stardust. They flowed not down, but in all directions, up, inward, sideways, defying gravity and understanding. She reached out, and the sands passed through her fingers like sacred mist. With every touch, her soul trembled with revelation. These were not grains of stone, they were moments. Each particle held a cry, a choice, a covenant. The voice continued, deeper now. You walk not a path of distance, but of depth. To uphold the promise, you must not only endure, you must become the thread that binds generations. You are not just a bearer of legacy, Sarah. You are its weaver. Visions deepened. She beheld her ancestors, Abram beneath the stars, a trembling voice whispering, so shall your descendants be. She saw women of strength and sorrow, bearing children, carrying burdens, lighting candles in darkness. She saw a child yet to be born, his eyes wide with wonder, his steps guided by her shadow. And she understood. The covenant was not merely written on scrolls or sealed by oaths. It lived in the choices made in hidden places, in the hearts of those who believed when belief cost everything. Tears streamed down her face, not of sorrow, but awe. The desert was not empty, it was full. Every grain of sand was a verse in the holy song of time. Every breeze, a whisper of divine memory. The weight she bore was not a chain, it was a crown. The Spirit's voice softened once more. Do not fear the flow. Time is not your enemy. It is the tapestry upon which the Eternal writes. Walk with reverence. Choose with courage. The covenant is alive, and it awaits your weaving. The hourglass faded into the sun, and the visions were swept away like dust on the wind. Sarah stood taller. Though the path ahead was uncertain, her steps would not be lost. For she walked not to escape time, but to fulfill it, to bring its threads together into a tapestry that would endure long after the sands had shifted. The wind lifted her hair like a prayer, and under the watchful gaze of heaven, Sarah stepped forward, a weaver of destiny, a guardian of moments, a daughter of eternal time. Chapter 7. The Vision of the Angelic Host. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the dunes like fingers reaching from a world forgotten. Sarah walked the edge of twilight, her feet touching the cooled sands as the light of day bowed gently to the hush of evening. The wind had quieted, as though the desert itself awaited something beyond comprehension. Ahead, nestled within jagged cliffs carved by time and tempest, lay a hidden valley, a cradle of silence beneath the vast cathedral of the sky. There, the air grew dense with unseen energy, charged with the breath of heaven. Sarah paused, her spirit sensing the holiness of this place. Then light, a shimmer, subtle at first, like stardust gathering in the dusk. It blossomed above her, cascading down in rivers of radiance. The sky opened like a scroll, and from its boundless height descended the angelic host, a multitude clothed in flame and glory. They did not fly. They unfolded, wings vast as the firmament, eyes like twin galaxies, voices not spoken but sung, resonating with chords older than creation itself. They formed a circle around her, not to judge, but to witness, to bless, to declare. One step forward. His presence stilled the winds. His gaze pierced the veil of the soul. His armor shimmered with the light of stars, yet unnamed. He was an archangel, a prince of the heavenly court, a guardian of the eternal flame. Sarah, chosen of the covenant, daughter of promise, he proclaimed, his voice echoing through sand and soul alike. Your steps have brought you to the threshold of divine purpose. The journey behind you has carved faith into your bones. The journey ahead will demand the fire of your spirit. He raised his hand. There, suspended upon his palm, was a scroll, ancient, beautiful, terrible in its holiness. Its edges pulsed with divine light, and its letters danced like fire across a starry veil. This, he said, is the record of the covenant, inscribed by the hand of the Eternal One, sealed with the breath of the Almighty. It reveals the path set before you, but it does not promise ease, for within it lie not only the way, but the trials that seek to unravel what has been bound. Sarah's hand trembled as she reached for it. The moment her fingers touched the scroll, visions flooded her, empires rising and falling in flame and glory, a river of blood and prayer, altars built in secret, martyrs bearing torches in the darkness, and above it all, the flame, unyielding, unconsumed. She saw her people wandering, waiting, weeping. She saw a child born in a cave, and kings kneeling before him. She saw a lamb upon a throne, and a sword of light splitting the shadows of the world. And then she saw herself, standing on a mountain, arms lifted to the heavens, clothed in light, and whispering the words of the covenant as the stars leaned in to listen. The archangel's voice fell gently now, like rain upon the soul. Remember, Sarah, he said, the covenant is not merely a bond between heaven and earth. It is a living flame, kindled by love, sustained by faith, and sealed with sacrifice. You are now its keeper, its voice, its vessel. Then the angelic host rose. They ascended as they had come, not with thunder or fanfare, but with a reverent silence that left the valley aglow with their departing presence. A trail of light lingered in their wake, a celestial veil draping the cliffs in holy radiance. Sarah stood alone once more, but she no longer felt alone. In her hands, the scroll pulsed with divine purpose. In her heart, the memory of celestial voices echoed. In her soul, a fire had been kindled that would never die. The valley behind her glowed like a dream, but her gaze turned forward, toward the wilderness, the trials, the destiny still unfolding. And as the stars took their place upon the night's throne, Sarah stepped onward, not only with faith, but with the blessing of angels, the scroll of heaven, and the eternal covenant burning in her hands. Chapter 8. The Mirage of Doubt. The sun rose like a blazing judgment, casting down its fire upon the desert sands. Every grain beneath Sarah's feet shimmered like molten gold, each step a contest between flesh and flame. Her robes clung to her frame, soaked with sweat and grit, while the wind offered no relief, only the cruel kiss of burning dust. But it was not the heat that truly threatened her. It was the silence, a silence that echoed within her soul, where once the voices of angels had sung and the scroll had pulsed with divine light. Now, there was only the sound of her breath, shallow and strained, and the ceaseless rhythm of her footsteps against the unyielding earth. The true trial had begun, not of body, but of spirit. Far ahead, where sky and earth blurred into a wavering horizon, a mirage began to form. It danced like hope clothed in sunlight, a radiant oasis glimmering with promise. Palm trees bowed over cool waters, and fountains sang a melody of rest. Birds circled above in gentle arcs, and voices, sweet and familiar, called her name with warmth. Her pace quickened. Her heart reached forward, aching for comfort, for an end to the solitude. Was this the reward foretold by the angels? Was this where the covenant would unfold its first bloom? But as she drew near, the vision broke. The trees bent inward, dissolving into skeletal branches. The water turned to sand, dry and cracked. The air shimmered not with holiness, but with deception. And then it came, a voice subtle as a breath, smooth as silk soaked in venom. "Why do you still walk this endless path, child of dust?" it whispered. "The covenant is but a story, a dream buried in the sands of time. You carry a scroll that cannot speak, a flame that cannot warm. Turn back, surrender, rest." It slithered through her thoughts like a serpent, coiling around her fears, pressing against her doubts with chilling intimacy. "What if the promise was never meant for you?" it murmured. "What if the eternal has forgotten?" Sarah's steps faltered. Her breath caught. Her heart, once steady, now quivered beneath the weight of uncertainty. The desert around her spun, no longer a path, but a prison. She remembered the archangel's gaze, the words of fire, the scroll that burned in her hands like a living thing. But now, they seemed distant, veiled behind the storm of her mind. She fell to her knees. The sands rose around her like specters, whispering her fears back to her. Alone, forgotten, foolish, but from the deepest chamber of her soul, a flame stirred. Small, silent, but real. It was not loud like thunder, nor dazzling like the angels. It was simple, a memory, a moment, a whisper once spoken by the eternal in the quiet of her soul. "I am with you." She closed her eyes, let the flame grow, fed it with every step she had taken, every sacrifice, every vision. And then she rose. Her voice, cracked and parched, emerged like a battle cry against the darkness. "No, I will not turn back. The covenant is alive, and I am its keeper." The mirage shattered. The illusion dissolved like smoke on the wind, revealing nothing but barren rock and dry earth. But Sarah stood taller now, her shadow long against the sand, crowned by the fire within. She had faced the trial of doubt, and passed through its fire, not unscathed, but unbroken. The desert remained. The path was still long, the horizon still distant. But now, she walked with a defiance forged in the crucible of temptation. She walked with faith not borrowed from visions, but born from within. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the heavens in harsh light, Sarah moved forward, her heart steady, her flame unwavering, her soul carrying the eternal covenant through the wilderness of uncertainty. For true faith, she had learned, is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to keep walking even when the sky is silent. Chapter 9. The Echoes of the Desert. The wind rose like a mournful choir, sweeping through the vast and voiceless canyons. It howled with an ancient sorrow, stirring the sands that had once borne the footsteps of prophets and wanderers, kings and slaves. In this desolate cradle of time, Sarah walked alone, yet not untouched by the sacred murmurings of the ages. Each footfall awakened a whisper, not of the present, but of the deep past, voices entombed in the bones of the earth, released now by her journey. They spoke not in language, but in vibration, in pulse, in breath. They wove around her a tapestry of memory, echoes of promises sworn in fire, of covenants etched into stone and soul. And Sarah listened. The silence of the desert was not empty. It was pregnant with the weight of eternity. It tested not only her strength, but her identity. Was she but a grain among the sands, scattered, lost, and soon forgotten? Or had the eternal truly placed upon her the mantle of legacy? By day, the sun reigned like a tyrant, stripping flesh and will alike. By night, the cold crept in, merciless and watchful. And still she pressed on, wrapped in her mantle of dust, her eyes ever searching the horizon for signs, for stars, for signs, for hope. And as the sun dipped into the western veil, bleeding gold and crimson into the sky, Sarah's thoughts turned inward, to Abraham. His name was not only a memory, but a fire in her bones. She saw him as he had once stood, eyes lifted to the heavens, counting stars he could never name, yet believing they would become his sons and daughters. His faith had sown the seed of this sacred journey. And now, she, his beloved, his equal, his companion, bore the scroll of the covenant through the desert of trial. "Abraham," she whispered, her voice carried on the wind, "your promise is mine now. I walk where you once dreamed. I bear the flame you first kindled." And as if in answer, the wind shifted. A melody arose, faint, haunting, neither wholly human nor divine. It danced upon the air like incense, pure and unbidden. No instrument played it. No lips formed its song. It was the voice of the desert itself, singing through stone and sky. Drawn by the sound, Sarah followed. The stars emerged, one by one, as if summoned to light her way. The song grew clearer, a lament and a lullaby. It led her to a cleft in the rock, hidden by shadows and time. There, veiled in palm fronds, lay a small oasis, untouched, still, shimmering beneath the moon's pale gaze. Sarah knelt. She cupped the water in trembling hands and drank. Cool and pure, it ran through her like a river of grace, washing away the weariness, the doubts, the scars of fire and fear. She closed her eyes, letting the silence return, no longer heavy, but holy. In that sacred pause, she felt them, the ancestors, not in ghost or vision, but in spirit, the women who had walked barren roads before her, the mothers of nations, the silent saints whose names have been lost to scroll and psalm, but not to the eternal. They breathed with her. They stood behind her. She was not alone. The desert had spoken. Its echoes had not been sent to break her, but to awaken her, to remind her of who she was, Sarah, not merely wife or wanderer, but matriarch of the covenant, chosen flame-bearer of a promise that would ripple through time like water through thirsty stone. She rose, her eyes lifted not to the oasis, but to the stars reflected in its still pool, stars Abraham had once counted. Now they watched her, bright and patient, witnesses to her vow. "I will not falter," she said softly. "I will carry this promise to the ends of the earth." And so she walked on, the desert behind her, the covenant before her, the echoes of the past surrounding her like armor. With each step, Sarah became what the ages would remember, not just the beloved of a patriarch, but a pillar of faith, a flame in the wilderness, a mother of multitudes. The keeper of the eternal fire marched onward, and the desert, once silent, now sang her name. Chapter 10. The Veil of Illusions. The sun reigned mercilessly in the heavens, a blazing eye that watched without pity. Beneath its gaze, the desert sprawled eternal, an ocean of flame and dust, where the horizon melted into a haze of dreams. Sarah walked onward, though the ground beneath her seemed to sway like water, and the sky shimmered with deceit. The air was thick, not with sand, but with lies spun from light. She blinked. The world around her quivered and changed. Palaces of alabaster rose from the dunes, their banners fluttering in winds that carried no scent of truth. Gilded thrones beckoned her. Emerald gardens, free of toil, stretched to the edge of vision. And she stood at the center, robed in splendor, adored by multitudes who chanted her name as if she were already legend. But her heart stirred with unease. The ground beneath her feet held no weight. The voices rang hollow. The crown upon her brow, imagined though it was, pressed like iron, heavy with a burden she did not choose. A voice, smooth and coiling, slid through the veil of illusion. "Why suffer?" It whispered, neither male nor female, yet filled with cunning. "Why bleed in the dust when glory may be seized without pain? Take this path of ease, of dominion. The covenant can be claimed without the agony of waiting, without the tears of faith. Sarah faltered. Her lips were parched. Her soul ached. The road behind her was etched with sorrow and silence, with unanswered questions and nights of weeping beneath an indifferent sky. The voice knew this. It pressed where her scars still throbbed. But deep within her, the flame stirred. It was not the fire of ambition, nor the blaze of pride. It was older, quieter, steadier. It was the fire kindled in Abraham's tent when stars were counted in hope. It was the fire that warmed their prayers when the child did not come. It was the fire that had refused to die, even when all else faded. Her eyes closed. No, she breathed, not with defiance, but with conviction. The covenant is not won by conquest. It is born in trust, watered by tears, and shielded by faith. That which comes without sacrifice bears no roots and will not endure. At her words, the mirages trembled. The thrones cracked. The palaces turned to sand. The adoring multitudes vanished like mist. And the voice, once silken, shrieked like wind through a hollow tomb. The veil shattered, and behind it lay the truth, not gilded but raw. The desert was no less harsh, no less vast, but it was real. Its stones bore the weight of her steps. Its silence welcomed her honesty. The sun no longer mocked her, it bore witness. The sands no longer deceived, they received her courage. Sarah stood alone, yet unshaken. She understood now. The illusions were trials, no less dangerous than beasts or famine. They tested the soul's compass, offering false crowns in exchange for true calling. But she had seen through them. She had chosen the path of truth, even when it led through shadow. The covenant could not be claimed like a prize. It must be lived. And so, with the illusions behind her, Sarah walked on, each footfall a quiet anthem of resistance, a hymn to the enduring strength of the faithful. She did not seek applause. She did not crave ease. She sought the Eternal's will and the journey that sanctified the soul. As the sun descended behind a curtain of distant ridges, the desert seemed to sigh, as if acknowledging her triumph. Stars began to kindle above her, not as omens of greatness, but as companions to her solitude, silent, ancient, and steadfast. The path ahead remained long, but Sarah now knew no shadow could ensnare a heart lit by faith. And thus, through dunes and darkness, through whispers and wind, she moved forward, the matriarch unbent, the flame-bearer undeceived, guardian of a covenant not bought, but proven. Chapter 11. The Fire of Revelation. As twilight descended upon the endless desert, the sky became a canvas painted in strokes of crimson and molten gold. The sun, a weary traveler itself, slipped slowly beneath the horizon, its final rays caressing the earth with a tender farewell. Sarah stood alone atop a wind-swept ridge, her gaze fixed on that fleeting moment when day bowed to night, and the world held its breath, suspended between what was and what might be. The desert air was still, the usual whispering winds hushed, as if the very sands awaited a revelation from the heavens. Then, without warning, from a cluster of stones near her feet, a flame sprang forth, but not a flame of ruin or despair. It was a fire of pure, radiant light, a living blaze that danced and twisted with a will of its own. Its colors shimmered, golds and blues, reds and whites, painting flickering shadows upon the rocks that seemed to tell stories older than time. Sarah stepped closer, feeling not the burn of heat, but a warmth that seeped deep into her bones, kindling a fire within her soul. The flame's dance was hypnotic, its movements like a sacred ritual, alive with power and purpose. And from its heart, a voice spoke, clear, resonant, and filled with the authority of ages, yet tender with compassion. Sarah, matriarch of destiny, the voice intoned, the covenant you guard is no mere promise penned by mortal hands. It is the very spark of creation, the eternal flame that kindles life, hope, and renewal in a world thirsting for light. Within you burns the sacred fire of revelation, a beacon to guide generations yet unborn. As the voice echoed in the silence, the flames began to swirl faster, wrapping around her like a cloak woven from light itself. Through the fiery veil, visions unfolded before her eyes. A child yet to be born, radiant with promise and power. The fulfillment of the eternal covenant, a new dawn breaking over the horizon of time. Sarah's heart swelled with a mixture of awe and solemn responsibility. She understood now the depth of the trust placed in her hands, a trust that demanded more than courage. It required the wisdom to embrace the dualities of existence. To protect this flame, the voice continued, "You must walk the path of light and shadow, joy and sorrow, victory and sacrifice. These are not contradictions, but the very essence of the covenant's strength. The fire within you will burn brightest when you accept the whole of the journey, the trials and the triumphs alike." The radiant blaze slowly dimmed, its light softening into the gentle glow of stars emerging in the indigo sky. Yet, inside Sarah, the fire of revelation burned ever brighter, a flame eternal and unquenchable. It was a knowing, a deep and ancient truth settled within her spirit, steady and sure. With the desert night wrapping around her like a silent witness, Sarah turned her face toward the path ahead, a path cloaked in mystery, lined with challenge, but illuminated by the eternal light she now carried within. The journey was far from over, but with the sacred fire blazing in her heart, Sarah stepped forward with renewed strength, ready to meet the unknown with courage, faith, and the unwavering power of revelation. Chapter 12. The Guardians of the Oasis. After endless nights beneath the vast celestial dome, where stars spilled like scattered jewels across the ink-black sky, Sarah's weary steps finally brought her to a hidden oasis, a rare, emerald gem nestled deep within the desert's harsh embrace. The air shifted as she approached, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine and fresh earth, a stark contrast to the arid expanse she had traversed. This oasis was a sanctuary unlike any other, a secret cradle of life that flourished against all odds. Tall palms swayed gently in the warm, whispering breeze, their fronds casting delicate shadows upon the smooth sands. Crystal-clear waters rippled quietly beneath the canopy of stars, reflecting the heavens like a mirror, serene and endless. Here, the desert's fierce breath softened, replaced by a sacred stillness that seemed to hold the weight of ages. But Sarah knew this refuge was guarded, not by stone walls or watchful sentinels, but by ancient beings whose power transcended the mortal realm. Spirits bound to this land, custodians of the covenant's sacred seed, rose from the shadows of the palms. They were the guardians, ethereal and radiant, their forms shimmering like morning mist touched by sunlight. Their eyes glowed with timeless wisdom, pools of light that pierced the darkness and reached deep into her soul. As Sarah stepped forward, the guardians did not speak with words, yet their message was unmistakable. It echoed within her heart, a silent voice resonating with authority and peace. "You who carry the promise," their presence whispered, "know that this oasis is a wellspring of hope, a sanctuary for the covenant's flame. It is both refuge and trial, a test of your worthiness and strength." Moved by the sacredness of the moment, Sarah knelt by the water's edge, letting her fingers brush the cool, life-giving liquid. She felt a pulse beneath her touch, the vibrant heartbeat of the oasis itself, an ancient energy that flowed from the earth to the heavens in a timeless rhythm. The guardians circled her in a solemn dance, their luminous forms weaving a tapestry of courage and resilience around her spirit. Yet within their luminous gaze lay a warning, a caution of storms yet to come. They spoke of shadows that would seek to snuff out the flame she bore, storms of doubt, of fear, and relentless trials that would challenge every fiber of her being. The path forward would not be gentle, but the strength she gathered here would be her shield and sword. With a heart full of gratitude and solemn resolve, Sarah accepted their gift. The oasis was more than a resting place. It was a crucible of transformation, where her spirit would be tempered like steel in the fire of the desert's truth. As the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of rose and amber, Sarah rose renewed. Her breath came steady and sure, her heart now beating in harmony with the ancient pulse of the desert and the sacred covenant she had vowed to protect. The journey ahead was uncertain, shadowed by challenges untold, but she was no longer alone. The guardians watched over her, and within her burned the eternal flame of hope and faith. The oasis faded behind her as she stepped forward, carrying the blessing of the desert's ancient protectors, a promise that no matter the trials, the covenant's light would endure. Chapter 13. The Trial of the Endless Night. As the emerald sanctuary of the oasis faded behind her, swallowed by the vastness of the desert, Sarah pressed onward into uncharted lands where the familiar light of day gave way to an unending night. Here, the sun no longer held dominion. Above her, the stars burned fiercely, brilliant and cold, but their distant light offered little warmth or comfort. Time itself seemed to unravel, folding and twisting in ways that defied mortal comprehension. This was a realm beyond the ordinary, a place where faith alone could guide a weary soul. She had arrived at the fabled trial of the endless night, whispered in hushed tones by desert winds, and spoken of only by those who dared to believe in the covenant's power. This trial was said to be the ultimate test of spirit and endurance, a crucible where darkness sought to consume even the brightest flame. As darkness wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak, Sarah felt its oppressive weight settle on her mind and heart. The silence was profound, thick and unyielding, broken only by the subtle, haunting whisper of shifting sands, the desert's own breath. Minutes stretched into hours, hours into what felt like eternity. Each moment was a twisting labyrinth with no clear path, no visible end. The endless night sought to erase all hope, to drown her in isolation. Within this abyss of shadow and silence, Sarah's spirit was assailed by visions, ghostly apparitions of failure, despair, and abandoned dreams. Faces from the past blurred with fears yet to come. The voices of doubt slithered through the darkness, clawing at her resolve with chilling promises of surrender. They whispered, "Why fight what cannot be changed? Why carry a flame that will surely burn out?" But in the depths of this night, where all seemed lost, a faint light glimmered within her, her own inner flame. Though flickering and fragile, it refused to be extinguished. Sarah clutched it tightly, feeding its fragile glow with every precious memory she held dear. The covenant's sacred promise, Abraham's unwavering faith, the celestial voices of angels who had pledged their guidance. She summoned that spark with fierce determination, nurturing it until it grew into a beacon that pierced the surrounding darkness. Slowly, the shadows recoiled, dissolving like mist before the dawn. The cold night sky softened as the first blush of morning kissed the horizon, spilling golden light over the rolling dunes. The desert was transformed once again, from a place of despair to one of hopeful promise. Emerging from the trial of the endless night, Sarah understood a profound truth. Faith was not the absence of fear, nor the denial of darkness, but the courageous journey through it while carrying the eternal flame. True strength was born not in the comfort of light, but in the steadfastness of spirit when all seems lost. With her heart rekindled and her spirit unbroken, Sarah lifted her gaze toward the vast desert stretched before her. The road ahead was endless, uncertain, yet rich with purpose and destiny. Each step was now a testament, not only to the covenant she bore, but to the unyielding light she carried within herself, a light that no darkness could ever extinguish. Chapter 14. The Whispering Sands. The desert winds carried secrets as Sarah journeyed onward, each step stirring the whispering sands beneath her feet like the soft murmur of 1,000 ancient voices. Every grain of sand seemed to hold a memory, a fragment of a story long buried beneath the relentless sun, a mosaic of wanderers, prophets, and promises etched into the very fabric of the earth itself. The sun climbed steadily, casting sharp shadows that danced upon the dunes, yet the whispers only grew louder, more insistent. They wove a tapestry of voices across the vast emptiness, echoing the lives of those who had walked these lands before her, souls who had borne the weight of faith and forged destinies beneath the same unforgiving sky. Sarah paused, closing her eyes, tuning her spirit to the murmurs carried on the wind, seeking guidance from the echoes of the past. Within the shifting chorus, a message emerged, clear and profound. The covenant's true strength was not merely in the sacred promise itself, but in the resilience of those chosen to carry it forward. The sand spoke of sacrifice, the quiet courage to endure hardship, the flickering hope that refused to die, and the unyielding will to protect life's sacred flame against all odds. Suddenly, the desert's breath shifted. The wind turned from a gentle murmur to a purposeful gust, revealing a hidden path beneath the swirling sands. The ground ahead was lined with stones, each carved with symbols of ancient power, glyphs that pulsed faintly with a timeless energy. The whispering sands had led her here, to the threshold of a new trial, a challenge that would demand every ounce of her courage and faith. Sarah's heart quickened as she stepped toward the stones, the weight of destiny pressing upon her shoulders. The desert was no longer a silent wasteland. It was a living test, a crucible shaping her into the matriarch she was destined to become, the guardian of the eternal covenant. With solemn resolve, she placed her foot upon the first stone. Each whisper from the sands became a guide, a soft voice urging her deeper into the heart of her calling. The path stretched before her, winding through the vast desert like a thread woven by fate itself. Sarah breathed deeply, embracing the sacred silence between the whispers, feeling the pulse of the desert's ancient spirit flow through her veins. With each step, she moved closer to the unknown, ready to face whatever trials awaited, fortified by the enduring strength whispered to her by the sands. The desert's secrets were no longer distant echoes. They were her song, her legacy, and the light that would lead her through the shadows of the days ahead. Chapter 15. The Seed of the Eternal Covenant. The final stretch of Sarah's long and arduous journey unfolded beneath a sky softly painted with the pale hues of dawn's first light. The desert, once a relentless crucible of trials, illusions, and whispered fears, now breathed with a quiet sanctity. It was no longer a barren wasteland, but a sacred cradle, tenderly holding the promise of a future still unfolding, an eternal covenant waiting to bloom. Before her stood a solitary fig tree, ancient and majestic, its gnarled branches heavy with ripe fruit glowing like jewels against the awakening sky. Each fig was more than mere sustenance. It was a symbol of life, hope, and the divine promise that had carried her across scorching sands and endless nights. This tree was the seed of the eternal covenant, a living testament to the sacred legacy Sarah was destined to guard. As she stepped closer, the memories of every vision, every trial, every whispered prayer flooded her heart like a rushing river. The covenant was no fragile promise etched in stone or parchment. It was a living flame, a sacred fire passed from one generation to the next, growing brighter and stronger through the trials endured and the faith unwavering. It was the essence of life itself, the breath of creation carried forward by those chosen to protect it. Sarah reached out her hand with reverence, fingers brushing against the tree's rough bark, feeling the heartbeat of the covenant pulsing beneath its leaves. The life force of the desert seemed to pulse in harmony, the sands blooming subtly around her feet, a miracle born not of nature alone, but of endurance, faith, and the boundless power of divine love. The air hummed with a sacred stillness, as if the very stars above had paused to witness this moment, the moment when promise and purpose intertwined. Sarah's spirit swelled with a profound sense of fulfillment, tempered by the knowledge that her journey was far from over. The path ahead would still demand courage, sacrifice, and steadfastness, but the seed was safe. The covenant's promise would live on, not merely as words spoken in the wind, but as a living legacy, carried by the generations yet to come. It was forever entwined with the fate of the desert sands and the celestial fires that danced in the night sky. In that quiet dawn, Sarah, matriarch, guardian, and bearer of the eternal flame, stood as a beacon of hope, a living bridge between past and future. Her quest had forged a path of destiny, one that would echo through eternity, whispered on the winds, and carried in the hearts of those who would follow. With the seed of the eternal covenant cradled within the desert's embrace, Sarah turned toward the horizon, ready to meet the dawn of all that was yet to be. Thank you for joining us on this epic journey with Sarah, the matriarch of the desert. Her quest for the eternal covenant reminds us that faith and courage light the darkest paths. We appreciate your support. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more adventures. Until next time, may your own journey be guided by hope and destiny.